Now, when I say Munger had an ego, he knew, like, I can show you my notes from when I had dinner with him, right? He said one of the funniest things. He said that he always believed that he was smarter than everybody else. If he could do life over, he'd still believe that, but he wouldn't just show it as much. But they talk about, they're like, people have asked him, like, why'd you take a secondary, like, why'd you subjugate yourself to Warren? Because he understood that Warren is probably a once in 100 year, maybe once in like 500 year level fucking talent. And you have the opportunity to partner with him, and you won't because your ego gets in the way because you have to be the main guy, then you're probably not that smart anyways.
Glue Guys is proud to have Ramp as the first presenting sponsor of the podcast. I was shocked to learn that most financial teams spend 80% of their time doing operational work and only 20% of their time doing strategic work. Ramp flips that equation. This financial operations platform simplifies everything about how businesses spend money and spend their time. With Ramp, you can manage spend approvals, control your expenses, automate your accounting, track your vendor relationships, and even book your travel. Ramp enables finance teams to focus all of their attention on what's most important. It allows companies to issue physical and virtual cards to every employee with spend limits, category restrictions, and automated compliance checks to ensure spend outside of expense policy is never allowed to happen. Ramp eliminates both manual expense reports for employees and removes the need for accountants to spend hundreds of manual hours each month classifying transactions so financials are accurate. The Ramp team is all in on saving their customers time and money. Ramp is used by best-in-class businesses like Shopify, Airbnb, Anduril, and many more. They all use Ramp to manage their spend and automate away tedious financial processes that just distract from the main thing. Ramp is easy to use. Get started now and build a more efficient team and a more profitable business, whether you have 5 employees or 25,000. Go to ramp.com/GG to sign up for free and get a $250 welcome bonus. That's ramp.com/GG.
All right, Glue Guy listeners, let's talk about something that might just change the way you sleep forever. 8 Sleep. You've probably heard of the pod, right? I mean, if it's good enough for Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, it's probably worth checking out for yourself. But they've just upped their game with the Pod 4 Ultra, the new gold standard in intelligent sleep systems. Now, here's the deal. The Pod 4 Ultra is like having a climate-controlled assistant in your bed. No, not like that, you freaks, but it is simple. You just add it to your current mattress like a fitted sheet and boom, it automatically cools or warms each side of your bed. So no more battles over the thermostat with your partner, no more blanket tug of war. It's all been settled. It's been clinically proven to give you up to an hour more quality of sleep every night, which, I mean, who couldn't use that? The standout feature here is the cooling capability. This thing can cool your side of the bed to 20 degrees below room temperature. Perfect for those hot summer nights. Now imagine setting your bed to a perfect 55 degrees while you're in a deep sleep, all managed by the Pod's autopilot feature, which adjusts the temperature throughout the night. So you get a deeper, more restorative sleep even without thinking about it. Unbelievable. Now, I took over 1,000 naps over the course of my 13-year NBA career. I played well over 1,000 games. And Michael Lewis once called me the no stats all-star. Now, if I had 8 sleep during my career, I would have been the stats all-star. Seriously. Sleep is the new Rolex, it's the new Mercedes, it's the new luxury brand. So why wouldn't you want the best sleep money can buy, the best sleep possible? Now, the best part, you can add the Pod 4 Ultra to any bed, whether you're just an athlete trying to optimize recovery or someone looking to improve your quality of life. So right now, you can get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra at 8sleep.com/Glue Guys. Just use the code Glue Guys. Level up your sleep and thank me later.
So we got David Senra in the house. He's the one who's surrounded by these books, which is appropriate because he is the host of Founders Podcast, which is fucking amazing. There have been over 350 episodes over the last 8 years. If I'm not, David, do I have these stats right?
I just hit 8. I started at September 2016. So 8 years, almost 8 years exactly.
I really like the contrast between Shane's background and Senra's, though, too, of just like surrounded by books, just absolutely crushing the game, professional podcaster, and then us amateur hour, Battier in the closet.
I don't have a rug on my house. I just moved to Charlotte. I don't have a rug. I think we lost all our rugs. And so this is the most padded room we have. And it's real. This is about being real. Glue guys, this is not fancy. It's not luxury. This is fucking real. You work where you are. You start where you are. Start where you are.
Oh, I like that. And David has probably one of the more unique approaches I've ever seen, which is there's just so much content that goes into every single episode. There's so much work. There's so much effort. And what comes out is just this incredibly passionate tale of what makes history's greatest entrepreneurs, what made them great. And we listen to him all the time. And David, in addition to that, is probably one of the most fun friends to have on text because he has the best gift game of anybody I know. Just like always sending Kobe gifts or Jordan gifts or Drake gifts, just like every time. And just so much passion, so much enthusiasm, lots of F-bombs.
Yeah, the thing that I'm blown away with, you do it by yourself. Like it's amazing.
I don't let anybody edit it either. Like nobody touches it. I pick the books, I do the reading, I obviously make it, I edit it, I like upload it, like everything. I actually think that's really important. I know like I've got all this advice and from people I love and respect, and they're like, you're fucking wasting your time. Like it's not a good use of your time. I actually think it's like what makes, let me back up and like talk about like why podcasting to me is like an absolute miracle and why I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And I really don't want to think about anything else or do anything else. I do think it's a legitimate miracle. I think it's a printing press for the spoken word. And I think, people think of a podcast like just like one person sitting around talking to another. And it's like, no, it's a medium. It can be whatever you want it to be. It could be you're completely fucking obsessed with the history of entrepreneurship, and you can sit in a room by yourself for 8 years, read, 100,000 pages and make 400 hours of content to distill all the lessons that you learned. Right. And one thing that I think is important in this is like, I look at founders as like one giant conversation. So I was in a group chat with a bunch of other podcasters, and actually Patrick is in there, and I consider Patrick like the best interviewer in the world. Like the way he is.
By the way, David, are we going to get invited into there now that we're podcasters? The three of us. Does it feel like we're going to get into this group chat?
The idea that there's
easy,
Ravi,
easy. Let's earn success. We're young.
And he asked a question. It's like, if you could, like if you had to be just defined by one single episode in your entire body of work, what would it be? And everybody else could answer. And I was like, I think I was kind of annoying. I was like, I don't really think about it like that. He's like, just answer the question. I was like, I think about founders as like one giant conversation on the history of entrepreneurship, and I just update it every week. And like, I hope to have this conversation, till I die. And so to the point about like why I don't let any, like I insist on doing everything myself, is because it's just like, I mean, Shane, did somebody else shoot you your free throws in practice? Somebody of those corner threes? Is like, you have to do the work yourself. I'm not trying to take the easiest or the fastest way out. Like, I think the hard way is the right way. And when I go back, and by the time I publish an episode, between the reading, the researching, the highlights, the listening to it back, the editing, inputting all that into the database where I keep all my notes and highlights, it's like I've gone over that material like 5 or 6 times. So therefore, a year from now, I could be reading another book and be like, oh shit, this thing on Kobe is very similar to, this thing on James J. Hill or the founder of Whole Foods or Elon or any of them else. So I think that's actually like an overlooked point, that like taking that shortcut may save you time that week, but it's going to cost you 5 years from now.
I'm struck by just your history, and you've been very vocal about the role models or lack thereof growing up with your family history. But to look to history as sort of your role models, I mean, that's an amazing perspective that I want to hear more about.
So it is kind of funny because like we kind of all reveal things, like people can observe things about us that we don't even understand, even though we've have that lived experience their entire life. So there's this guy named Jeremy Gaffon who did one of the best, I think it was the most viral episode of Invest Like the Best last year. It's called Special Situations in Private Markets. And he's become a good friend of mine. And we were walking around Miami Beach, and we stopped to get like coffee or something. And he goes, it's pretty obvious what you're doing. I go, what do you mean? And he's just like, you have like this obsessive, almost borderline psychopathic personality. He's like, you never have a mentor. So founders are just like this he's like, if you had a obsessive psychopathic tendencies, right? And you never had a mentor, it's like, and you want to search for one, you would search for it the way that you're doing it. And I was like, I've never felt more like, I didn't even understand that about myself. This is actually really important because I have a mug that I drink like I take espresso all day long. As you could
that's a shocking revelation, David.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that.
And it's a bunch of quotes from Warren Buffett. And he says like one of the most important things in life is something like picking the right heroes. And I'm understanding this now because I'm doing this 2-week series on this guy named Li Lu, right? And Li Lu they call him like the Chinese Warren Buffett. That's how Charlie Munger describes him. And he had probably one of the most horrific childhoods you could ever imagine. Grows up unbelievably poor in communist China, has to escape because the government's trying to capture him and kill him. Comes to America. This is how remarkable this guy is. And I won't like do the whole episode for you guys because this episode would be like 4 hours long. But he comes to America in like early 20s, teaches himself English in a summer, enrolls at Columbia University. He's one of the first people in Columbia University history to get 3 degrees simultaneously: a degree in economics, MBA, JD. Okay. He takes the float. He uses his student loan. He has no fucking money. He uses the student loan payments as float. By the time he graduates Columbia, he has $1 million, right? It's like 97. 2003, he meets Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger's like, this guy's a fucking genius. Charlie Munger said in 95 years, he let one outsider run Munger family money, and it's Li Lu. And so anyways, I just did his childhood. Now the second part is like, how does he think about business building and investing? That's all the research I'm doing today and this entire week. And what's remarkable is it's just going to tie back to what your question was, Shane. It's like, you realize the guy considered Munger and Buffett a hero, and how many millions of people study Munger and Buffett. And then they say they study them and they say they admire them, but they don't fucking imitate them. It's like learning is not memorizing information. Learning is changing your behavior. And when I'm studying Lee and what he does, and then you hear what comes out of his mouth, it's like, all he did was like, oh, Munger and Buffett, those guys are good heroes. They have good ideas. I'll just copy that. It's incredible.
Well, the thing that you're talking about though, dude, too, is like what you just said on you controlling every part of it is like, okay, cool. So you're obsessive about control. You also are like basically vertically integrating, right? Think about some of the founders that you appreciate and think about some of those things that you talk about. Like, I'm going to control every step of the supply chain. I'm going to go do each part. That's what you're doing. Like you're just like not letting somebody else do any of that. And I think that like, that's probably an inherent lesson from some of the people that you admire too, if I had to guess.
100%. Like there's a great line. I can't remember if it was Sam Walton. It might've been Elon. They all do this. So from Rockefeller to Carnegie to anybody, it's like, you want to control much of your business as possible because you don't want to have to worry about what's going on in other guy's shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will you take one of the books and show the way you highlight it or the yellow notes?
Oh, okay.
I love that shit.
One of my favorite entrepreneurs, right? And I like get offended. Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett have this line where it says like, if you took the records of the top 100 business school graduates, right? You can combine them all together. They still wouldn't pale in comparison to Henry Singleton. Saying basically they thought it was a crime that business schools didn't study Henry Singleton. He's so good. And like when I went back and read Henry Singleton, you realize, oh, I thought these were ideas from Buffett and Munger. They're actually Henry Singleton's ideas that they applied. I feel that way about Estee Lauder. So this is a very hard to find book. It's out of print. It's published in 1985. So they look like this.
Yeah.
And essentially all I do is like I just sit there and I go through and I kind of highlight anything that I think is interesting and then just jot down whatever I think. And sometimes it's like summarizing what's on the page. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is like episode 192, or this is like Claude Hopkins said this, or whatever the case is, referencing the past people. And then I just go read them over and over again. I spend a day usually before I record going over and saying, now that I've finished the book and I know how the story ends, is this still relevant? Because the whole idea is the people that I want listening to the podcast are entrepreneurs. These are like, I know executives listen, I know investors listen, I know, all people, truck drivers listen, college students listen, but it's always and forever will be heavily focused on entrepreneurs. The time, entrepreneurs are usually not limited by capital, right? They're limited by time. So therefore it's like, I never want to waste a single minute of your time. So the value prop that I describe founders is like, I take 40-year career, 40 hours of reading, and distill it down to 45 minutes, because most of you psychos don't listen to podcasts on 1x like I do. It's like 1.5 and everything else.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's like a lot of the editing in the beginning was I used to put it into the microphone and edit in the software after. Now it's like I know what's actually important. And I'm using my taste and saying this, I can eliminate this part.
Who have you not been impressed with? You've read a lot of stories. Is there anybody you started, you're like, you know what? This is a charlatan. Or I'm not impressed, or like what I thought about these folks before I read this doesn't really sync up.
So keep in mind, like the whole premise of Founders is somewhat absurd in the sense that like I'm only studying people that have biographies written about their life. So that means like these people were so good at their job, somebody wrote a book about their life. Like that's the smallest percentage of any humans that have ever existed. Now there's most of them are, I would argue, are cautionary tales, right? Especially because I think it's very important to us. Like I called our mutual friend Sam Hinkie today, right? And I was like, all right, I'm recording with Ravi. And we've spent time together. We talk. I was like, what should I bring up? Right. And he's going to hate that I name dropped him. But I told him, I was like, I'm name dropping you today. And there's nothing you can do about it.
You're right. He's like twitching right now.
But he says, you have this great line that now I'm going to steal. And I'll probably at the very beginning attribute it to my friend Robbie. And then eventually I'll just say I came up with the idea. But it says that you have infinite time for the like family and friends, like the important, and like no time for bullshit. So because of like, obviously like I have vast like disgust for both sides of my family tree and a lot of things that they did to their kids and everything going back multiple generations. And so it's like, I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. It's just like, I want to be I have a very simple mission in life is like, I want to help people learn from history's entrepreneurs. And I want to be the best person in the world doing that. Okay. So everything that's not and my family and friends is like, has to be eliminated. And what happens is there's the vast majority of the time, it's like, if you were such a successful entrepreneur that they wrote a biography about you, you weren't a good family. Like, you're not like, oh, I'm a balanced person. These are not balanced people. And so the person that disgusts me the most also did me a wonderful service, and everybody that reads his book, a wonderful service. His name is Larry Miller. It's episode 168 of Founders. He wrote a book called Driven, an autobiography. And he essentially is writing it as he's dying. He's the richest entrepreneur.
Is this the jazz owner?
Exactly. He's the richest entrepreneur in Utah. He owns 93 different businesses. The average Utah citizen could not go a week without giving one of his businesses $1. He owns the Utah Jazz, owns car dealerships, movie theaters, all kinds of stuff. Writing the book, lives in a 30,000 square foot mansion overlooking on a mountain in Utah. And he's essentially says, my life is a cautionary tale. And he's like, he had a real fucked up childhood and crazy stuff. He was a juvenile delinquent. But the service that he did now that he knew he was dying, and when I mean that he knew he was dying, it's like they were literally like throughout the book, they're chopping off different parts of his body. It's like, there goes your fucking foot, there goes your fingers. It's grotesque. And his whole point was just like, my eyes were opened and I worked until my eyes closed at night. He's like, I was a bad husband. I didn't know my kids, and I didn't even have fun. And so he literally says, my life is a cautionary tale. That last chapter, he's writing this with a fucking co-author. The last chapter, he dies in the middle of the book before it's completed. And the saddest thing that ever happens is the co-author is now talking to his wife, and she's like, well, we can say we miss him, but it's not like he was here anyways when he was alive.
Oh, wow.
So that would be my answer.
On that note, David, I can't help, like, I've listened to obviously a ton of your podcasts and fascinated by all these larger than life figures and founders. There's a trade-off for all of them. They're all some level of obsessive, right? And we've talked about this constantly, that I think to do anything great kind of requires some level of that. And I'm so often, for me, it brings up to mind the head coach, right, in sports, especially like for football. I mean, like, it's a grind. It is a level of commitment to do it well. And these guys do it their entire life, right? Like, especially the guys I played for. And I do correlate when I listen to so many of your founders. Like, I'm like, that's a football coach talking. Like, like I listened to James Dyson, and it, like, when you were going through all that stuff, it just reminds me of Jim Harbaugh. Like the David Ogilvy, what's the name of his manifesto?
He's done a few, but the pursuit,
basically
the eternal pursuit of unhappiness.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, that it's like Andy Reid's. It's all over the facility, like the same things. Like, we're going to be fearless. Like, we're going to live on the courage side. Anyway, like, I feel like there's a little bit of that cautionary tale tied into everybody, right? A lot of these founders that have done and built amazing things. Who's done it the best in your mind? Who's found the balance?
There's 3 that I would say out of the ones I've covered. Number 1 is episode 222. It's Ed Thorpe. I think.
Hey, David, before you answer this, is your recollection like this for everything or just for your podcast? Because like the fact that you can go like, oh yeah, like this number episode is fucking crazy. But I'm just trying to figure out, is this just this, or is this the way you are on everything?
I mean, my wife's in the other room. I can go grab her. When people are like, David has a great memory, she's like, No, he doesn't.
That was my guess.
Join the club. Join the club.
No, it's just this. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's this is what I'm actually scared of. So don't let me, Alex, don't let me like not answer your question.
Sorry to interrupt.
But like the biggest, the biggest fear that I have is that like, and so if you think about like the two people I talk to a lot and that I trust and that I consider advisors and have been unbelievably helpful for me, because like I did the podcast for 5.5 years, no one gave a fuck, like no one listened, and it's Sam Hinkie and Patrick, right? I'm intensely loyal to both of them, and I have this conversation with them and they tell me that I don't have a good understanding of myself, where like I am very concerned that of my obsessive behavior and my ruthless competitive drive that I have, that it's, Alex just nailed the difference between James Dyson and Bill Belichick and fucking Michael Jordan and Larry Ellison. And, it's just like the same personality type. Napoleon, Alexander the Great. It's like the same. The best description of founders I ever heard is like, oh, it's church for entrepreneurs. And I grew up in like a fundamentalist Christian church. And I think that's one of the best descriptions, because it's not like every Sunday, the preacher's like, okay, guys, we went over the Bible last week. We're going to move on to like the next, the different book, right? It's like at some point people are going to realize David's just telling the different stories about the same personality type over.
I think that's also, like, not to interrupt, but that's also what's fascinating, I think, for people, is that it isn't just like if you're building a business, right? Like I know you obviously even cover it, like it's founders, but you have football, you do have Bill Walsh on there, and you've got directors on there, and you have people that aren't necessarily like a traditional founder. And I do think these things transcend that industry. And for me, it's I kind of take away, like, if you want to go do anything great, these are some great examples, right? Of people that have gone and done that. The thing that hits home for me, and I actually want your personal view on this, I guess, as I come around on this question, is like, you battle that work-life balance, right? And I guess you even personally, like with you founded your own podcast, right? And you I'm sure battle that same thing. Who has done it, and what's your view on that, right? Like, yeah, I want to go do this thing great. I'm obsessed about it. It drives me, but also, right, I do have a family.
There's three. The people that know me really well that I can seek their advice and like genuine friendship is like Patrick and Sam. And they say that I don't have an accurate read on myself, in the sense that like I am worried. I have a like remarkable family. Like I'm happily married. I have two great healthy kids. This is like, I am worried that my obsession with the podcast and what I'm making is like going to cause me eventually to like burn everything down in sacrifice of that goal. Why? Has nothing really to do with me. It's that I consider every single person I've studied on the podcast smarter and more productive than me. And you have the remarkable thing about reading biographies. I don't give a fuck if you don't listen to founders, but I do care that you read biographies. If I can be an evangelist for reading biographies, because what you're going to see is you're going to see some of the smartest, most productive people to ever live make mistake after mistake, bad decision after bad decision. Like we are all of us are imperfect human beings. And so it'd be so arrogant for me to think, oh yeah, that fucking guy did that, but it won't happen to me. It's like, no, he was like I'm more similar to him. Like I see the point of story, the wonderful thing about stories and why it's so powerful through human history. It's like when you're reading a biography or watching a movie, you're not thinking about the character, you're thinking about yourself and how you relate to them. So to answer your question, like I consider episode 222, Ed Thorpe, I think in the parentheses, my personal blueprint, but I fall short of his example all the time. And the reason I would say him is because Ed Thorpe's story is remarkable. If you're looking for an audiobook to read or to listen to next, I would get his autobiography called A Man for All Markets. Ed Thorpe, highly likely the first inventor of the quantitative hedge fund, became unbelievably wealthy, but stopped when he realized once he had more money he could ever spend in life, which is where a lot of people make the mistake. They keep trading time for more money that they'll never spend in expense of spending time with family and friends, taking care of yourself. So if you look at him now, he just gave a talk, and he was on Tim Ferriss's show last year too. I show that YouTube video and I was like, how old is this guy? And they're like 65. I was like, he's 93. So the reason I think he mastered life is one, he built a business that was successful doing something he was genuinely interested in. He was a good husband. He was a good father. His kids are in the book talking about how great he is. His wife's in the book talking about how great, like that he was a good father. He took care of his health. He got really involved in fitness early on and dedicated time, making sure that was a discipline every day. And then he had fun. He actually enjoyed life. He's the opposite of Larry Miller. Larry Miller's like, I wake up every day and I'm fucking, sad and depressed. So what do I mean by have fun? He's also like Ed Thorpe's like financial history Forrest Gump. You know how Forrest Gump shows up in like every important historical thing, right? So like Ed Thorpe, first founder of first quantitative hedge fund. He was the first LP in Citadel. A 19-year-old Ken Griffin goes to his house and Ed gives him all the files to what they were doing because he had shut down his hedge fund at that point, Ed's hedge fund. He meets a 38-year-old. He has dinner with a 38-year-old Warren Buffett. I think Ed Thorpe's 36 at the time, something like that. And he leaves the dinner, turns to his wife, and goes, that guy's going to be the richest man in the world one day. He builds the world's first the world's first wearable computer with Claude Shannon, the inventor of information theory, for fun. If you ever know that people talk about blackjack strategy of counting cards and how to like tilt the odds in your favor, Ed Thorpe he's a genius mathematician. He came up with the 0, 1 and like that counting card technique. Wrote a book about it called Beat the Dealer in the 1960s, and it sold like millions of copies. And he's just like, how is this? His autobiography reads like a thriller, and yet he still is just like a great father, great husband, built wealth, created jobs, took care of his health, and had fun. Like what? There's nothing else. There's nothing else.
Was it something in his process or something in his motivation you think that separates him? Like, why was he able to enjoy the journey as opposed to,
I think a lot of it has to do with temperament and rationality, which I don't think is common in human nature. But it's funny. I've done, I think, 2 episodes, maybe 3 episodes on him. And I just read, I think rereading books is very important. This idea where, like you just read it once and like, oh, I got it. It's like, no, like the words on the page don't change, but you've changed as a man or as a person.
Totally. There's that old proverb. It's not the same river, not the same man, right?
Yeah. It's like the fact that people like pick your heroes. You need 5 of them, 6 of them, whatever, and then reread it over and over again. Me and Hinky were talking today. It's like half our conversation was about the lessons we learned from Charlie Munger. It's just like I go back to Munger over and over and over and over again. So one, I think he was just his temperament, his rational, he's disciplined. These are not common traits in human history. But the first time I ever did a podcast on him, a lot of people obviously will listen to the podcast first, then they'll read the book. And I got a message, you're like, hey, you left something out of the podcast. I'm like, yeah, no shit. These aren't like, I'm not going to summarize the whole fucking story.
It's not a book report.
Yeah. But the guy goes, you left out the fact that he's an absolute genius. I was like, of course, like that should be implied that he was a genius. So he was just very, very intelligent and could actually apply his intelligence. And to not just, how am I going to be the richest person in the cemetery? Is that my goal? No, the point of building businesses and being good at what you do is to have a good life. All of that, the good life is the first thing.
Have you seen the Naval quote on this, David?
The definition of intelligence?
Yeah, it's just like the real test of intelligence is like, do you have a good life or not? It's not all the rest of this bullshit that people try to do.
And the second part, do you have a good life? Were you smart enough to get what you want out of life? Is the quote. So this is what I meant about, I love a lot of your lines. And I say, hey, my friend Robbie said this. And then eventually it's just like, I said it. So now I swear to God, I'm embarrassed at this. A couple of nights ago, it's like, I was having dinner with 3 founders. Like, you know what my definition of intelligence is? I fucking quoted Naval and didn't even say it. I was like, were you smart? Did you get, the only true definition of intelligence is, did you get what you want out of your life? Part 1 and part 2, were you smart enough to figure out what mattered anyways?
Related to what you said on Ed Thorpe, I actually think, and this is a separate topic, but I actually think you can make a pretty coherent argument that above a certain amount of money, it's not just that it's diminishing returns, that it's negative utility, right? Because all of a sudden, like, people are thinking about, what do you do with the money? What do you do with the money? They think about what the fuck they do with their kids. Like there's actually, I think there's like some intellect of like, it's not just that you get diminishing returns from the incremental dollar above a certain amount. I actually think that it's negative, net.
This is what I hope. And
for some people,
I agree completely. And so like what I realized through like doing this podcast for 8 years is like, there's actually a very small percentage of people that can actually learn from the experience of other people. Most people have to have the lived experience. I think so far, knock on wood, thankfully, I think I'm capable of learning from other people's experience. So like, because one of the most impactful things that ever happened to me wasn't even reading a book. It was having a 2-hour conversation with Sam Zell before he died. Okay. And this is exactly what he told me. And so this is how crazy podcasts are. I truly think
we
podcasting
appreciate
is a miracle.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because think about how fucking crazy it is. This weird guy with a giant fucking head sits in a room by himself, reading biographies, talking to I'm talking to myself in a $100 microphone for like 5 years, right? I read Sam Zell's autobiography. Sam Zell's, when he was alive, one of the best investors, deal makers, entrepreneurs ever. Sells his company, BlackRock, Blackstone, one of them, for like $38 billion. I make a fucking podcast on his autobiography. he listens to it, loves it, starts ripping through my episodes, and then he's like, how can I meet David? And so I get this like message, like Sam Zell wants from a newly created Twitter account. And it's like, Sam Zell wants to have lunch with you. Would you have lunch with him? I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, sure. He wants to have lunch with me. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it wound up being one of Sam's best friends and mentee for like 25 years, my friend Rick, who now me and him are good friends as a result of this. And we spent a bunch of time together. But we had a 2-hour conversation, right? And one thing, there's a couple things here. And sorry if I'm like monologuing, but
no, this is great.
This is really fucking important. And we talked about it before, like we were having technical issues and like Shane was like fucking cursing and like mad. And I was like, dude, bring the emotion to the podcast. Like authenticity, podcasts don't work if they're not authentic. Like you cannot, hopefully you guys do this for 10, 20, 30 years. You can't play an act for that long. You have to be who you are, you know? And so Sam, you know, I read his biography. I watch all his videos and like I see him on CNBC and they're talking with the gravelly voice and like he fucking shows up and I turn around like this guy's a fuck probably got $10 million or some crazy shit. I turn around and no entourage. It's just fucking Sam Zell by himself walking through the restaurant. So we sit down, right? And immediately, like you realize, like I've heard a bunch of your podcasts. You talk about like having as professional athletes. Now you have to transition to the next stage because your body eventually just doesn't cooperate with you anymore, right? The great thing about the game that we're all playing now is like this actually compounds. You should be better at 81 than you are today. And so we go back to this diminishing return. So Sam just gives me wonderful advice. And it's like, dude, I think about the guy all the time. Like legitimately, I have like a little Sam Zell on my shoulder. Like, what would he do? And his whole thing was, he's like, listen, I know all the rich people. He's like, all these rich guys he's like, they're fucking miserable. He's like, do not do that. So he's like, they all make the same mistake. He's like, David, you're going to make a lot of money. Like, because he saw the potential of the podcast and everything else. And he's like, do not make the mistake most people do. He goes, they make more money and they buy slightly nicer versions of the same shit. And he's like, the difference between a $10 million house and a $20 million house is negligible. He's like, I have my place in Chicago and I have my compound in Malibu. That's his line, not mine. There's a funny Sam Zell story. He's like, he wanted to show me pictures of his house in Malibu. So he hands me his phone. I'm thinking it's going to be pictures of his house in Malibu. It was a Google image search that says Sam Zell Malibu. I was like, all right, that's a flex, bro. That's a flex. So what he told me, he's like, listen, he goes, I have those two places. He goes, I rent everything else, right? He's like, the things that you own start to own you. He's like, I go for freedom. And he goes, there's only one true luxury in life. And he goes, that's the private jet. He goes, try to get to private jet money. Other than that, he's just like, that's it. Use money to have fun, to have like, to like do things you want to do. Buy the business you want, make the investments you want, do whatever that is case, and provide good experiences for your family. But don't chase the number. The number's irrelevant.
But David, that was an autobiography, correct? Like,
yes.
Would you say that some of your favorites have actually come from the founders themselves? Like the
autobiographies are always better.
Yeah.
Do they always have a ghostwriter, or do they just fucking go? Like, what is the nature of the autobiography?
Okay, so you can't see my entire bookshelf, but part of my organization is that all of the books behind me are organized by episode number, because if not, I wouldn't be able to find them. And so, like, look, I was thinking Les Schwab, so I can find it like that, right? Which you just saw. Like, so Les Schwab is one of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett's favorite founders. And the funny, look what the book looks like when I'm done, right? And the funny thing is, he's hilarious because he's like this old school, like, kind of like redneck kind of guy. And he goes, I wrote this in November and December of 1985. I did write this 100% with my 40-year-old typewriter. I did not have a ghostwriter. I wanted it in my own words. And so his whole point, no, but this is how gangster this guy is. So he goes, the reason, this is why he's writing the book. It was just for employees originally. And they got so fucking popular, cult like following, they published it. And he's like, I'm writing this to pass all my theories on business for, after I'm dead, for Les Schwab. He goes, you're going to love this guy immediately. Should we fail, because the name of the company is Les Schwab. It's named after him, Les Schwab Tires. He said, should we fail to follow these policies towards customers and employees, I would prefer that my name be taken off the business.
Dude, that is amazing. That is amazing.
So David, you talk about, a lot of the mature people who write books and have books written about them. I think for Alex and I and now Ravi, we have all climbed this huge mountain before age 40. And I never forget a conversation I had with David Rubenstein, and he said, "Look, like," and I'd retired and was thinking about what's next. He's like, "You got to understand, like, you've won the first third of life. All right, you won it. All right, hands down. What are you gonna do the next third of your life, and then what are you gonna do the last third of your life?" And that fucked me up. I hadn't thought about it like that, and so transition's been a topic that we've talked about a lot, and always finding what's next. Look, there's nothing like playing in NBA finals. There's nothing like playing for a Super Bowl. There's nothing like it. I'm sorry, nothing. And or if it's out there, we haven't found it yet. So what lessons can you give to us historically to draw upon of people who've had young success and have found out how to win that second third, that last third in a different way?
I heard you guys talk about this before. Like, I don't think you use this word, but like you have to pick a new mission. Like you see this a lot in the military, where like I read a bunch of biographies of like people in the military. Like it's the best job in the world. There's nothing like combat, which sounds like crazy to civilians like us. It's like, no, I could go without being shot at. Like, thank you very much. But there's such a high like suicide rate because they come down. There's like this huge drastic fall. There's this podcast called Jocko Podcast, which talks about this a lot. And the advice that they give is just like, you got to get your next mission. He's like, yeah, he was a commander in the Navy SEALs for like 20 years. Now he's a very successful entrepreneur, world-class podcaster, everything else. But he still says like, that's like, if I could go back, I would still do that. So I don't think there is a solution to those things other than I don't like thinking about like, I wouldn't like sit in your house and like, like stare at all your memorabilia and stuff. Like I become friends with A-Rod, who's been very nice to me and a good, and listens to podcasts. And like, you go to his house and it's just like, he doesn't have a fucking, we talked about this. He doesn't have like this. He's not sitting in the room. Like, look at everything I've done. Now he's just like, I'm focused on building my business. Like blinders, look forward. It's great to be proud of what you did and like, celebrate that, take the lessons from it. But if you sit there and like, the past is the past, nothing you can do. It's like all you have is this single moment. We haven't talked about Kobe or Michael, which obviously Michael Jordan, we should. But it's like, that's one of the main lessons of Michael Jordan's biography and what he learned. He talks about in The Last Dance, talked about it from Phil Jackson. It's like, stay in the moment, man. My thing is like, I'm going to be able to podcast until I don't have a fucking voice. So like, they're going to have to pry the fucking microphone from my cold, dead hand. Right. So I don't actually have like good advice for it because it's like, I can do this forever. Now I might have some kind of dementia or be like, dumber as I get older or whatever the case is. It's just like, it might not be as good, but I'd still be able to do it. And so I do empathize with that point. Cause it's like, I think about this all the time. It's like, imagine being, world-class at what you're doing. I'm going to do a bunch of podcasts on these tennis players. And eventually, and I just watched the first episode of this Serena Williams documentary, and it shows her when they were really young and Venus. And I don't, follow any professional sports right now except the UFC because I'm too like focused, and UFC only requires one night a month to stay up to date with the sport. And but I didn't know that. I knew Serena retired, but I didn't know Venus Williams was playing. And I was like, and a friend of mine who's into tennis, so I'm watching the documentary with. I was like, oh, how's she doing? She's like, not good. And we talked about that night. This was like 2 weeks ago. I was like, imagine that. Like, you want to do it. You have the skill, you have the mentality, you have everything else, but your body just doesn't cooperate. Like, that would be terrifying to me.
David, you know what I would add to that, and I love your thoughts, but like Shane, as much as like finding your next mission, don't you think it's finding your next team? Like, I feel like going back to the military thing, and then team sports is obviously a big giant rung under that, but like the guys miss the team environment, right? Like you miss the accountability to the group, the responsibility that comes with that. Like obviously and I think that's what makes that journey. Certainly is what I know I was drawn to team sports about, right? Like doing it together as a team. I'm fascinated by, and Shane and I get into this both times. Like, is it the leadership, or is it like, for us glue guys, is it the guys in the locker room that make it work, right? Like, well, who wins the championships? And certainly probably a mix of both. But there's a big aspect to your founders that are like these larger than life, again, characters and people in history. But like they did build at some point. They all built teams.
This is humans. They have they need to latch onto something, right? Like symbolism is huge in human nature. And so like I've heard a bunch. Steve Jobs said this. Elon Musk said this. Like I get too much personal credit, right? Because As humans, we want to relate to other people, right? It's not like, oh, I love Tesla, even if you like Tesla. It's like, I love Elon. You want the person behind it. And that's what makes, founders such powerful and effective people, because they're people that have access to, they have leverage for their decision making, and they're building organizations that are large themselves. But every single one of them, like, will tell you, like, one of the most important skills, maybe the most important skill for a founder to have, is recruiting. What's recruiting? It's selecting the right people around you and then building the team. So it's like, yeah, I can do 10 fucking episodes on Steve Jobs, but what's not stated, other than his priority of like finding the smartest people to work with and the highest quality people, right? They're not, that's just how humans' memories, you can't list 10,000 people that worked for him. Maybe you could have other people like Johnny Ive's going to be in there, Tim Cook's going to be in there, other people like that, Wozniak at the very beginning, Don Valentine's early in there. Like, there's all these other supporting characters, but it's just human nature to just latch on and give all the, in NFL, you're a quarterback. Like, why is the quarterback more well known than the center? Like, or whatever the case is. Like, I can't name
I actually think that's like the perfect analogy, right? And you've talked about the offense as like a ballet, but the quarterback, the blame and the credit, right, often goes to the quarterback. But it's actually like a pretty good fucking analogy, right? Just like, there's no way it works without all 11.
The reason I started listening to your podcast, other than the fact that we're going to be on the same network and I'm genuinely interested, no one's covering the glue guys. No one's talking about that. That's actually really important. And then how many fucking glue guys are there, and glue women, right, in organizations? Millions, hundreds of millions. Like, the people that could benefit from you guys sharing your stories about these usually overlooked people is way larger than the people who can benefit from the stories that I tell. So I think it's a really important work.
We would all love to be the superstar. Well, Alex was a superstar, Pro Bowl quarterback. We'd all want to like take the last shot and average 30 a game. It takes a lot of hard work to be in the middle, but still have an impact. Our stories are interesting because it's out of necessity, and it's out of love, and it's out of, ultimate competitiveness, which I think, when we talk to folks about this podcast, and I do a lot of corporate speaking around the countries to an unusually large amount of CPAs and bookkeepers, they say, yeah, that's me. And so, like, I'm more convinced, like, that's the every person's story of like, yeah, I'm fighting like hell and I want to win. And but
Shane, I think that's incomplete. And like, look, I'll tell you guys, like, I definitely feel one or two things. Alex is too humble to say this, but like, I think a big part of this is like, I think the whole glue guy moniker of being like just the person in the middle or the person at the bottom is bullshit. I think the whole point is like, you can be a connector no matter what position you're in. Like, look, man, in some companies I've been like low level to mid level. Some companies I've been high level. I take pride in the idea that you can be that no matter where, just like you've talked about, Shane. So like, I don't want it to be just for people that are like not, senior or leaders in their organization. Frankly, I think that, the founders that are going to build something of consequence, I think they have to be glue guys on them in their own right. And I actually genuinely believe that.
And again, like, think about it. Like, is Munger taking the last shot? No, that's Buffett, right? But like, Munger's a legit genius. So like, this is not like, Hinky, we're talking about the it takes a certain level of self-awareness and a lack of ego. Now, when I say Munger had an ego, he knew, like, I can show you my notes from when I had dinner with him, right? He said one of the funniest things. He said that he always believed that he was smarter than everybody else. If he could do life over, he'd still believe that, but he wouldn't just show it as much. But they talk about, they're like, people have asked him, like, why'd you take a secondary, like, why'd you subjugate yourself to Warren? And he's just like, his answer, I don't remember the exact word, but essentially the conversation me and Hinky were having, is just like, because he understood that Warren is probably a once in 100 year, maybe once in like 500 year level fucking talent. And you have the opportunity to partner with him, and you won't because your ego gets in the way because you have to be the main guy. Then you're probably not that smart anyways. And exactly. I know Munger was smart because not only you could see point to his body work, but when I got to speak to him, so like, you see all the books behind my head right now. Munger was sitting in front of his bookshelf when I talked to him. And when I find somebody I love, this, I read every single book about them, and then they talk about who they love. And so I'll read every book they recommended. And after it was like 10 minutes where I was like frozen. I was just staring at Munger. I was like, how the fuck did I wind up in Charlie Munger's house? Like, what is happening right now? Once I snapped out of that, I just started lighting him up with questions, right? And a lot of it was based on the books I saw behind him that he had recommended and I had read. And I'd ask him about this book, and he would literally like pull out what the company did, how much money they made, who were the partners, what was the outcome. And I would ask him, I was like, did you reread that recently? He's like, I haven't read it in 15 years. And then I pull the book. He let me go through his library, and I pull the book off, and I showed you. Munger is the opposite of me, where like I need notes and highlights and memory and reminders. There's nothing in there. It's in his fucking head. That is a legit genius. And he's telling you, he was in this situation, he's a glue guy for Berkshire. He's just like, that guy is talented. I'm going to support him in any way possible. One, they had a great relationship, but also because it's the best choice he can make for his own career.
I never thought about it like that, but he is the fucking quintessential glue guy. And that's the whole like thing that I will tell you, like ego wise, like I don't want it to be that like, oh, you're only a glue guy if you're like, you know, stuck in the middle of the fucking org. Like, no, that's the whole point. The whole point is your responsibility is to make your team win, right? And you, wherever part you're in, go make that happen. And if you don't do that, then you suck at your job. It's that simple. Like you have to go and like make the team win. Do whatever you have to do. And this dude picked the hardest game, right? Public market investing. They picked the hardest game, and he decided to do it with the best guy, and he decided to help them win. Like, yeah, glue guy.
Exactly.
Shane, you going to talk about Kobe? I feel like I'm kind of want to tune in just to hear you and Senra talk about you and Kobe.
Well, I loved your episode on Jordan and Kobe. I had the pleasure of playing against both. All right, I caught Michael as a wizard. I know a lot of Bulls fans don't remember that. I know it happened.
We just talked about not looking back.
And he still gave us like 40. Okay, I was on a bad Memphis Grizzlies. We were bad. We were really, really bad. You can go on YouTube and see the clips. Like Jordan gave Batty a 40.
Were you guarding him, Shane?
That's the bullshit. That's the bullshit thing. On YouTube, it says I was guarding him. If you go to the clips, it was Drew Gooden, who's another light-skinned brother like me. So it looks like me, but it wasn't me.
There we go.
But it wasn't me. He gave me a couple jumpers, okay, but it wasn't me, okay? But
my image of him and the Wizards, by the way, is just nothing but fadeaway jumpers. Just mid-range fadeaway jumpers.
He's still at the swag,
anyway,
though.
Go ahead.
Look, everybody's got a picture of them against Mike, you know, in that era. And, you know, I got mine, and someone gave me a blurry picture from the pyramid. I grew up playing in the pyramid. You know, it's a blurry picture, upper deck, and Jordan's in his perfect Jordan fadeaway, and I'm contesting, you know, and it gives me chills every time I see it. So, look, I'm from Detroit. So, you know, I believe in the Jordan rules. So Ravi and I, you know, Ravi obviously grew up on Jordan, and his opinions are different than mine, you know. So I grew up going to the Palace of Auburn Hills and seeing the Pistons beat the shit out of Jordan, because that's the only way we could stop him, you know. Yeah. And once, you know, I learned a lot from Jordan and just that era of 80s, 90s basketball. And I don't know if it's as prevalent today. You have to beat the best to be the best, right? And so my childhood was, you know, watching the Lakers and the Celtics, you know, battle it out. All right, the Pistons could never beat the Celtics. You know, the fucking Celtics, right? You know, DJ steals it, passes the bird. I mean, it was like a nightmare. And that time we finally beat the Celtics, it was like aha, you know. And then we beat the Lakers. But Michael could never beat the Pistons. We beat the hell out of them, bad boys, Jordan rules. And that moment where the Pistons walked off the floor because they knew it was over, I got it. You know, and the world was in an uproar. That wasn't classy, but like, I got it. They knew at that time it was over. And you go into the 90s and like Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, they could never beat Jordan. And like, as much as they're pissed off they never won a ring, it was they never beat Michael, right? And so there's something about when you knock off the champion, and I lived it, you know, playing with the Miami Heat. I lived it at Duke. I lived it many, many times. There's something about beating the best that transcends all championships. Championships are just a byproduct, and they're fun and they're awesome, and but it's being the best by beating the best. And then, you know, obviously my battles with Kobe have been well documented. You know, he's a guy who I loved, but also hated. And we had the strangest relationship.
Why'd you hate him?
Because he was an asshole. He was so passive aggressive.
He seems to me aggressive. So that's interesting. What do you mean by passive aggressive?
Passive aggressive, very passive aggressive to me. So I never had a conversation with Kobe outside the arena. Never, not once. And even though he was my contemporary, he was a month older than me. Obviously, he came out of Lower Merion and straight out of high school, and I came out of, after 4 years at Duke. He and I grew up in actually very similar situations. All right, he grew up in the hoity suburbs of Philadelphia. I grew up in the hoity suburbs of Detroit. Right, we went to private school. I think he went to private school. Where he went to an area where he was always searching for that street cred. I never got the street cred, and like I know Kobe identified more as Italian than he did black. No, it's true. In his books, he spent his childhood in Italy and was really, really bummed he had to leave Italy to come back to the States. And so he never was that guy that was clamoring for street cred of inner city Philadelphia, right? And that was my childhood. Like I grew up in Birmingham, Michigan, and I never got street cred from going downtown Detroit and playing in the Police Athletic League and playing against the brothers, right? And so like the only way I knew was like beat their ass. And that was Kobe. The only way that you're gonna respect me, I'm gonna beat your ass. And so in a lot of ways, we were so similar, but we were just very, very, very different in the way we approached it. And so Kobe, look, was an absolute monster. And my rookie year, here I am, fresh out of Duke, National Player of the Year, 3-time National Defensive Player of the Year, and I get drafted to a bad Memphis Grizzlies team. David, when I got drafted to the Grizz, they had the lowest winning percentage of the 4 North American pro sports, right? So NHL, NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. It was a bad franchise. We were bad, didn't know how to win. And we played the Lakers when they were rolling. They had Shaq and Kobe. And
what year is this, Shane? Is this 01?
2001.
Yeah.
So this is like they're rolling. All right. They win the championship that year. I mean, they're stacked. We go to Staples Center, and I got a big ego. Like I'm gonna check Kobe. I can't stop him, but I'm gonna do well against him. He hung 56 on me in 3 quarters. 3 quarters. They're beating us so bad. Phil didn't play him in the 4th quarter. Right. And I'm just like, holy shit. And we're a bad team. Like I have no help set defense. Like no one's helping me. No one's coming over to take a charge, block shots. I'm just getting roasted. And I'm just like, man, I got to figure this guy out because I plan on being here for a while. He's going to be here for a while. So like, man, this can't happen again. It was embarrassing. And, he was my favorite matchup and my most horrifying matchup. There's nothing I will ever feel to this day like getting on that bus at the Marina Del Rey Ritz and riding to the Staples Center saying, man, I got a fucking monster tonight. I got a monster. There's no way around it. And I got to stop. And so we talk about competition and wanted to be the best in the world and wanted to beat the best in the world. Like that was it for me, man. Like he was my Moby Dick, or I was his Ahab, or he was my Ahab and I was his Moby. I don't know what the alliteration is there, but for me, Kobe represents the pinnacle in competition and in greatness. And there's no other player that brought the most out of me than Kobe.
I'm just letting it sit there for a second. Shane, when David was talking about how like I forget in what context, but like, in his own podcast thing of like the hard way is the right way. Like this is it. Like I want to do it that way. When you talk about the Kobe time, was that a matchup that like all in? Was that kind of like what kept you going during the season? Was it ever mundane when you weren't going up against him? You know what I'm saying? Or did you look forward to it, or did you dread it?
No, I didn't look forward to it. Like he was the best. It was great when it was over. It was like getting your annual physical. It was like getting a colonoscopy. It was like, okay,
that's the best thing. And like, could you imagine? Like, that's one of the highest compliments you could give a competitor. It's like going against you is like wrestling grizzlies, is the way Buffett says going against Rose Blumkin was. It's just like I'd rather wrestle grizzlies than go against her. He's like, it's like getting a colonoscopy.
with a clean bill, you live afterwards, but it wasn't fun. And so David, when I say he was super passive aggressive, like all the stories that you've read about him, he was aggressive. But with me, like he was so damn smart. Like I saw the guys like Ruben Patterson, Rajah Bell, Bruce Bowen, they'd poke the bear. right? They trip him, they talk shit to him, and like you could see Kobe, walk around the court like this, and getting all pulling back his chest. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. Like I'm no dummy. Like I'm a kid from Birmingham, Michigan. Am I gonna like physically confront Kobe? No. And so like I took the exact opposite, calculated approach. I was like Eeyore when it came to Kobe. I never once publicly said, you know what, I can guard this guy. Never. I was like, man, like I'm just lucky to be on the same court as Kobe. He's greatness. I'm just a schlep, right? And so I downplayed any matchup we ever had. And when I got to Houston and sort of learned the ways of analytics and data, thanks to our guy Sam, I at least had a fighting chance and was as effective as anybody against him.
So what do you think is the best lesson you learned from him?
Relentlessness. It's Kobe was never satisfied, and that was what was scary about him. If he scored 20, he wanted 30. If he scored 30, he wanted 40. If he scored 50, he wanted 60.
One of the favorite the stories that you guys have told on your podcast so far is, I'm so glad I was listening, and I was like, you brought up when you were giving the talk right before Bezos, Ravi, right? And I was like, please, you mentioned relentlessness, right? So we just talked about the fact that I'm just telling the same story, the same personality. It's like Jeff Bezos, relentless, Kobe Bryant, relentless. And I was listening along, and I'm driving through the Santa Monica Mountains. I remember where I was when I was looking at this. I was like, please fucking talk about the fact that he owns the domain relentless.com, which then you brought up. But for people that didn't hear the episode, can you just tell that brief story of like how you got, like, that is relentless. Like, you give a talk, and then you get tapped on the shoulder, said Mr. Bezos insisted you must leave.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy. Like, I mean, these guys.
Which, by the way, at that point, like AWS had launched. Like, what portion of grocery do you think made up Amazon's P&L? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like it was.
No. Like, I think if I do the math right, it's so ridiculous. Just like you just said, Alex, because like that's like 2017.
For the people that didn't hear, can you give the 60-second what happened?
So I'm giving this talk at this conference, and I go. The person after me that's talking is Jeff Bezos, which is so freaking ridiculous. But anyway, I'm like pumped to listen to the dude because I've never even been in the same room as Jeff Bezos. I give my talk, and afterwards, the founder. This is at the Khosla Ventures CEO Summit. The founder, Vinod Khosla, comes up to me. He's like, "Hey man, I'm really sorry. Jeff and his team don't want you in the room for his talk." And you're like, what? And so it's like so ridiculous. And I'm like, in retrospect, I'm sure there was some reason with Amazon Instacart that was specific or whatever. But all I feel is like Jeff Bezos, who has no idea who I am, is all of a sudden like, you got to go because you work at Instacart.
That's relentless.
That's relentless. And I think to the math, Alex, of what you're saying, like, yeah, Amazon has hundreds of billions of dollars of sales, right? For sure. They have just bought this thing, Whole Foods, and that is 1.8% of the US grocery market. Like, the thing they bought is 1.8% of the market, like not 25%, 50%, whatever. And so it's like a small portion of the grocery market. It is a tiny portion of their sales. And he is fucking Jeff Bezos, right? He's got a lot of things going on. He probably had already started Blue Origin by then. Like, he's trying to put rockets into Mars. Yet still, it's like, no, dude, this guy from this competitor to our little acquisition, he can't stay in the room while I talk. Like, it's absurd.
I think it speaks to the relentlessness, and relentlessness is usually it presents itself or it makes itself known in the details. So like everything you just said makes perfect sense. A million other things. He's still paying attention. I guarantee you Kobe had a million other things. Like, was Kobe not detail-oriented, Shane? You played against him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's the same fucking personality.
I think you'll appreciate this, David. My favorite Kobe story was that the article came out that Michael Lewis wrote, New York Times, Sunday Magazine, the No Stat All-Star, and it sort of chronicled my use of data and why I was, a great glue guy. And no one explained why the teams I played on had a lot of success. Fantastic article, still timely, many, many years ago. And it got back to me that this really rankled Kobe, because he would never, ever, ever admit that anyone could stop him or have any insights on who he was. And it got back to me that he actually had hired someone to do counter analytics on the way that I defended him to see
wanted
if like
proof. He wanted proof.
to see if there was actually smoke, to see if there was actually something that I knew that he didn't know. And that's Kobe Bryant. That's my favorite story about Kobe. And like I always thought I'd have this conversation with him, and it hit me really hard when he passed away.
I was devastated. I read so much about him, and I wasn't a Laker fan. Like I had stopped watching the NBA. It was so big. It was because I felt like I knew him. And yeah, obviously, like, I don't want to go through life with people saying I'm an asshole and everything, but again, we talked earlier about like these stories are powerful because they're not stories about other people. They're really stories about ourselves. And so like, I'm never going to play in the NBA, right? I never but I still see myself like certain things I either like, and some of them are aspirational. Some of them don't even like, I don't have those traits, but I desire them because I see them in other people. And yeah, like, because I was really curious. I like what he said. It's like, you don't copy the what, you copy the how. Right. And like, and that's the biggest thing. It's like, I'm looking for the principles and ideas behind how these people built their companies, and realize it doesn't matter if you're building a steel company, grocery delivery service, a rocket company, whatever case is, like, there's just same fundamental principles of company building and entrepreneurship that just reappear over and over and over again.
But there's two things that remind me of what you're saying, Shane. I think you should talk about one of them for sure. To me, when you said it hit you hard, and then you talked about when he said what he talked about you, I think it was in his book, right? When he, like, what he said about you. I always feel like that to me is this, like, it's almost like you felt seen. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real, like, oh wait, he actually got it. Like, what did he say in the book about you?
So I had never read his book, Mamba Mentality, because I had conflicted emotions about Kobe until he passed away. And I opened up his book, and he actually dedicated a page to me. And it was talking about Kobe stoppers and people who defended him well. And his main point was like, I didn't believe anybody could really guard me. There was a lot made about me sticking my hand in his face.
Look, he's got it. He's got it.
Yeah. Sticking the hand in the face. But something to the fact that like my muscle memory was so great that there wasn't a strategy, a technique that could that alter me. And if David can find Kobe says it better than I could say it.
You got it wrong, Shane. He didn't dedicate a page to you. He dedicated 2 pages to you in the index of the Mamba Mentality, which I have in my hand. I just went to Battier. There's 2, and look at this. Look at these pictures. Okay, so I'm gonna cut anything that could reflect poorly on you. No, I'm kidding. So he starts out. This is again like I think it has to do with like always projecting strength, because the first sentence is, when someone like Shane Battier face guarded me, it didn't really impact my game. Okay, well, maybe we have numbers that indicate otherwise. I don't know. I believe that I could shoot through it. The basket wasn't moving, so muscle memory just kicked to work. I didn't have to see the rim to make a bucket. Shane as a whole was a solid defensive player. He was smart too, smart enough to understand that talking trash riled me up. Shane, as a counter to that, would tell people he couldn't guard me. This is what you were just saying. By doing that, Shane thought he was going to take the bite out of my game, take the edge off. But I saw through that tactic, understood his premeditated modesty, which it's really smart, and attacked him because it. Safe to say, I had a lot of fun playing against him. So that's a pretty like.
I mean, that's
like,
pretty
good.
That's what I was saying about like feeling seen, right? Of like, you're doing that. He sees you doing that. He's angry because you think you can fool him. I mean, how cool is that?
I describe that as the meta game. It's a game above the game that no one else knows you're playing except you and someone else. And so like in all the people you study, any other examples of people talking about the meta game that they reflect on and say, you know what, this company, this person, this was my Ahab, my Moby Dick.
What I really think this is like, if you could take like everything that I've learned in this like 8 years of like this intense study and had to distill it down to one word, it's like focus. And what I feel, this is another line from Charlie Munger that I feel like I just say as myself. It's like the distracted don't beat the focused, right? It's like everybody's multitasking. They're doing a million different things, where like Kobe is just focused on one thing. So it's like he even picked up that like your modesty was false. Where it's like it wasn't like
I love that he's like taking himself there, right? Like here he probably read some press clipping, and Shane's being modest and like actually probably giving him love, but he's to your point, like a focus and like to get the edge. He's taking himself. He's like fuck that guy.
Totally.
He's trying to make me soft. He's
Totally.
trying to soften me up for tonight. And I'm going to fuck, you know, like Shane's like complimenting him and he's working himself. Yeah. He's like, fuck that. This guy's trying to make me, you know, like not have an edge. I'm bringing it.
This is something like, let me see if I can pull it up. Cause this is something I try to preach. It's just like, you know, to like in many cases, my podcast is like a podcast about hedgehogs, right? So there's this great post. It's like difference between hedgehogs and foxes. Foxes know a little bit about a lot of things. Hedgehogs know a lot about a single thing. And those are the only people I'm interested in spending time with. They're only the interested in studying. It's only what I'm interested in. It's not like I'm telling you, hey, I'm going to be really great at podcasting and like, you know, tennis or some other shit. It's just like focus because of this. It's like every minute that I'm spending doing something else takes away from getting at that, what you just called like the meta level, the deep understanding. And what I realized, because I got to speak to these people in person, it's like spending time with Charlie Munger and Sam Zell, right? It's like the books come alive. And so what I realized Sam Zell too, is like, by the time I met him, he had 61 years of experience as an entrepreneur. That guy, everybody is around him that told, it's like, you'd bring him a deal and, you know, you think there's like 3 pages of what's really important. It's like that one thing right there. That's they hack away at the unessential and they focus on what is really important. What I love about Munger is he was describing like, why would you give money to Li Lu? 95 years. You're 95 years old when he's giving this talk. You only gave money to him. And his whole point is like what people miss about studying Buffett and Munger is that they make all their decisions based on opportunity cost. But they really actually account for our opportunity cost. They don't just say, I make decisions based on opportunity cost. And so they're like, for me to give money to something else, they have to be better than Li Lu. And how many people are better than Li Lu? No one. And so as a result, this drastically simplifies my life. And I think that's the really important point, is just like, stop looking around. One of my favorite tweets I've ever come across was this, and I don't even know whatever happened or who the person that tweeted this, but his mentor had died. And he said, the best advice my mentor ever gave me, because he's a young man trying to like build businesses, right? Young kid. And he's like, rabbit eye kid, stop looking around and focus. And I think that when I get around, you see it in the books, when I get around these older entrepreneurs, it's just like they focus. You are way too distracted. You're gonna multitask. You're gonna try to do 5 things, and the person that, like Kobe, is just doing 1 is going to win.
Dude, it's also so much more fun to just be focused on something. You know what I'm saying? You know, I'm like a zealot on this. I'm so happy that is like a takeaway from your work, dude, because like it's just more fun to actually care about one thing and to have your entire self. And Alex, you talk about all the time, like being all in. How the fuck are you all in if you're distracted and hedged and worried about 5 things at once? Like it's not a thing. And so it's like the worst combination. It's less effective and it's less fun, you know?
100%. I want to go back to something you guys said, because I actually think it's really important. You brought up, Shane, you were talking about Jordan rules, and we got to get to Coach K stories, because I'm like a sucker. Like every time you guys mention Coach K on like Glue Guys, I'm like on the edge of my seat. I wonder if there's any good biographies.
I was just going to say, is there a book? And again, I said this earlier, but like when I listen to all these founders podcasts, like I'm like, there's so many great coaches that I feel fit this bill and are like, have great stories and lessons. And I know you did Bill Walsh. Have you done any other coaches? Like,
so I have Bill Belichick. Keep in mind the bookshelf behind me holds like almost like 800 books. I've only done 350, and I have bookshelves everywhere else. So like I have my queue of unread books, but could be potential episodes is running like 300 to 400 books right now. But I have Bill Belichick. I have Pat Riley, because again, this goes back to again, reading biographies and hopefully listening to founders is like, so you can see yourself in these stories, right? And I've always been a huge Pat Riley fan. And I was watching this interview he gave many years ago with this guy named Dan Le Batard, who's started out as a local Miami media guy, and think now, nationally has a big podcast and everything else. And he was talking about, he's like, this a couple of years ago, he's like, why? You're in your 70s. Like, why do you want to, like, why are you still fucking working? Like, why are you doing everything? And, Shane, you can speak to this. He has an intense desire, ruthless competitive drive. And what I loved, and when I saw this, I perked up. I was like, one sentence made me realize I have to do an episode on Pat Riley, because Dan's like, why is it like that? He goes, just because it is. Because I came out of the womb like this. And I'm like, fuck, that's exactly how I feel. Because people are always telling me like, like I love what you do, which is, I love the podcast. Why don't you do Y? It's like, oh, so let me get it straight. You love, I do X, take time away from X and do Y. It's just like, or they're like, take a break or you're going to get burned out. I was like, I'm not going to get burned out because I'm not a like, what are you talking about? I read books for a living. Like this is, and I've been reading nonstop since I was like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years old. It's just like every time when Sam, we talked to today, it's like, how you doing? My answer to that question is the same every fucking time. Better than I deserve. If you went back to 8-year-old fucking David and be like, how did we do? Like, what's it like, multiple decades in the future? It's like, dude, my job is reading fucking books. My job is reading books. And then like, I built a very valuable, media property around it. I get to meet and spend time with world-class entrepreneurs. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about burnout? Like, I want more, not less. And so when I see Pat Riley, and I've been like that my whole life, it's like, I came out of the womb like this. I was like, yes. So yeah, to answer your question, like I want to do Coach K, Pat Riley. I got Bill Belichick. I got Phil Jackson. You mentioned Larry. I got Larry Bird has to come. The best.
Dude, I can't wait for these. Oh my God.
I've been collecting Larry Bird shit talking stories for like years. Like years. So I want to go back to one thing before we go to Coach K, because I do want, well, let me just tell the Coach K. You guys saw the Redeem Team documentary. My favorite thing, because this drives me too. Jeff Bezos has this great line where he's just like, in his shareholder letters, he's like, we're trying to accomplish great things that we can tell our grandchildren about. Such things are not meant to be easy. If you want the easy route, you're not fucking at Amazon then. Get out of here. And Coach K had a very similar statement right before they played. And he's just like, many decades in the future, you're going to have your grandkids on your lap. You're going to tell your grandson that you lost this fucking Argentina team. And he goes, you should be like, you're going to have to kill me. And he said something like, you're going to have to fucking kill me. And I think the best entrepreneurs, the best coaches, the best athletes, that's just like, you want to stop me? You're going to fucking have to kill me. And like, it sounds so, people make fun of me because it's like, oh, you're applying it to podcasting. It's like, no, like this is my love. You don't have to love it, but like, yes, I take it just as seriously. I want to go back to the Jordan rules thing. Cause like, that is actually one of like the most underrated, it's obviously appears heavy in The Last Dance. And I think they did a good job of telling how important it is, but in the books, especially, it's just like me and Patrick, I just flew to New York to spend a few hours with Patrick. We're going to talk about stuff podcasting related. And there's an area that we feel we can improve upon. And we were talking about how to solve this problem. And we arrived at the decisions, like the best way to solve the problem is to develop our fucking skills ourselves, right? And the reason the Jordan rules part is so important because Michael Jordan doesn't come Michael Jordan, right? Without what you just said, going through that roadblock. There is literally pictures I keep on my phone, okay? There's screenshots. You guys know the history of Jordan. Like you can go back and you can see Larry Bird, right? Saying nobody like him. Point blank. I never seen anybody plays like the way he plays. Magic Johnson. Jordan is the most talented player in the NBA by far. This is like 6 years before he ever won a championship. It was obvious, but he still couldn't break through, right? And so I actually think that's a really important point, and it applies to families too. But like the Jordan rules thing, the main lesson I took apart from there is just like the reason I say the hard way is the right way, and that you have to run towards all the problem is it's opportunities in work clothes. That's all problems are. They're just opportunities in work clothes. You're going to have to figure it out if you get to work. And then what happens, you solve this problem. And now on the other side of that problem, you have a skill set you lacked. When Tim Grover, the guy that wrote the book, when he's just like, what did he do? He's like, he couldn't withstand the physical punishment, and then they had to change the team and everything else. It was just like, if he couldn't have been Jordan if he didn't overcome that. You don't want to run away from these challenges. You want them because on the other side of that, you become better. And it prepares you for the next challenge because there's always another challenge. The way I think about this is really important. Danny Meyer, the world famous restaurateur, right? He has a great line in his autobiography where he's talking about, he was a young man. This is way before Shake Shack. He was just doing like high end, New York restaurants, and he's fucking depressed because he started to expand his company. It's not going well, and he's sitting next to this old school entrepreneur. And his guy's name's Stanley Marcus. He's from the Neiman Marcus family, and Stanley's very patient. And Danny's telling him stories as a young man. He's probably in his 20s or 30s, and he's just like, "Oh, I have all these problems. I don't know what to do. It's all sad." And he says, basically, Stanley called him on his bullshit. He's like, "Young man, excellence is the capacity to take pain." That is
That's
my
the Four Seasons
favorite
founder.
Yes, that is my favorite maxim. I collect maxims for a fucking living, right? My favorite maxim in the history of entrepreneurship is excellence is the capacity to take pain.
Who said that?
The founder of Four Seasons, Isidore Sharp. You know, it's like on his. I think that's episode 186. I might be wrong on that. Maybe 184. So we'll have to check, but it's back in the 180s for sure. And you know that's one of the best autobiographies you could ever read, because it's like he says, he has a great line in the book where he's like, when we built our first hotel, we didn't know anything about hotels. And then like his wife talks about the fact that, you know, her biggest contribution to her husband's
184, you sick fuck.
was
Yeah. Sorry.
But this is a like it's a wonderful book for a lot of reasons. But I'm pulling up the highlights of the book right now. And one of my favorite things is because this is actually something we need to talk about, because I think you guys talk about this, like how the importance of the support that you get from your families. I know, Ravi, your dad's your hero. You're the support of your wife. You know, Shane, the story you fucking told in an earlier episode about like the sacrifices that your parents made, you wouldn't have been in the NBA like without the sacrifices that they made. I'm getting goosebumps right now. It's like, those are what I think is going to make your podcast, your guys' podcast so powerful, is like these personal anecdotes based on this very unique, how many fucking people living, you know, was a quarter, like they just don't have the experience, the life experiences you guys have. And then for you to explain how this came to be, I think is like really important. But something that's not talked about enough, and this is what I realized reading all these biographies, is like, for entrepreneurs, you either need a supportive spouse or no spouse, right? The role of a supportive spouse, like I have a very supportive spouse. You know, like my wife believes in me more than anybody else. And this is not unique to me. And she, you know, her ability is like, I trust your judgment. I know you're like this anyways. I'm along for the ride. It's not like it's not going to change. But Izzy Sharp's wife said something that was very fascinating. And it talks about how the pain he was in. And she goes, I had the pleasure of watching his mind work. In bed in the middle of the night, I sometimes find him with his arms crossed behind his head, gazing up at the ceiling and weighing possibilities. Early on, he made some audacious statements that sounded like pipe dreams. He once told me that his aim was to make Four Seasons a worldwide brand synonymous with luxury like Rolls-Royce. Sure, I thought, with only about 10 hotels, which is what he only had at that time. Hardly likely, but I didn't let on. My most valuable contribution to his success has been my silence. For an entrepreneur, the outside world's going to doubt you. Most likely they're not even going to doubt you. They're going to be completely indifferent to you, right? But like the investors are going to be skeptical of your plan. Customers are going to be skeptical of your plan. Employees are going to be skeptical of your plan. Maybe even co-founders, friends are skeptical of your fucking plan. Your spouse can't be. And so what she just said, she's just like, I believe in you. I love you. And so you coming home and just like, this isn't going to fucking work out. Like your idea is stupid. Like that's not helpful. And that is overlooked. That's a glue guy-esque fucking idea. It was just like, she's a glue guy.
Yeah.
It's
totally.
just like, cause she's like, I'm going to sacrifice this because I want to help you win.
Dude, David, one thing that I'll tell you on the personal anecdote side, I had never thought about this until you just said it. All of us are surrounded by glue guys in our lives personally. All like if you look at it, like the stories that Alex tells on the what is the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you, he told a story about his wife, right? And he told a story, and then Shane, same thing. Always talking about Heidi, but then the story about his parents, what they did for them. Avni, my parents, my kids. I am fucking surrounded by people that want me to win in whatever I'm doing, and will do anything to help me win with no credit to them whatsoever, right? Like surrounded by these people.
Yeah, it's overlooked, and I think should be commented on a lot more.
We're gonna have to do a spouse episode with
Oh, wow.
No, honestly, that's fucking smart.
Spot on. Yeah,
dude, that one should be in person. And right now, you and Shane are splitting the bill. I'm just letting you know from the fines. Like, I'm definitely not participating in the bill for that one.
They should host it, and we should let them just talk about how smart we think we are, and actually, they are the reason why we are where we are. That's good copy.
I want to talk about real quick too. Is there anything that you guys learned from like your sports career that you applied like to your family?
hell yeah, absolutely. I battle with this. Is me personally. Like my kids play sports. My oldest especially like wants to play football. I really battle with I mean, his dad was I played professional football, right? Like I never grew up with that. I grew up with the freedom of any kind of expectations. Like and I love that. Like I look back on, and we've talked about this, like my entire life before I got drafted, I was just so free playing sports. Like there were no expectations for me. And it was amazing to do that. And I didn't specialize in one freaking sport, which all these batshit crazy parents do now. And like I played a bunch of sports, different season came on, I played a different sport. Like there was so much freedom in that. And I know how life changed with me when expectations were put on me. Like, and I did a lot of it myself, but like, again, that come with that. And so I'm so conscious as a parent to not do that. Right. And that his like my kids' upbringing is different, right? Like their dad played pro football. Like that was freaking insane. You know how lucky I was and how many breaks I got to be able to achieve what I did. Like that's not really attainable, but he grows up with that potentially. And so how can I combat that as a parent? How do I try to?
But you're not pushing him in that direction.
No, hell no. I'm trying to offset it. That's my point. Like I want to get him like, be free, go play sports, go do it. You don't have to play football. Like I don't want that weight or pressure at all out there. Constantly fight that. Yes, absolutely.
I learned a lot when I retired. That's why I asked a question about sort of the first third of your life. It was really hard for me. I really, really struggled. And luckily I have an awesome wife who said, Shane, I know you like choices. I'm gonna give you 3 choices. Here's the number to the Marriott. Here's the number to this, your attorney. Here's the number to this life coach that comes very highly recommended. And I said, Heidi, I'll choose door 3. And what I learned that I took from my playing days is like, look, it was very easy to be relentless and burn the ships when it came to my career, and just being relentless and uncompromising about my work, about my sleep, about my meals, about my nap time. I had everyone trained around my schedule, right? And what I didn't do a good job of was I did not support the glue people around me the way I probably should have, and I took them for granted. And they gave everything for me to be the best athlete I could be, and like I gave everything I could to be a championship team. So I probably gave more time and energy to my teammates than I did my own family, right? And so in the afterworld, the importance of being just super intentional with my time, my energy, like I was with my teammates and my coaches, to my friends and family now. Because when I first got out, I didn't feel like I had that relationship, and that was my biggest mistake in my entire playing career. And so something I remind myself of often, to be very intentional, fostering relationships, strengthening relationships, and whether it's a call, text, an email, a note, all those things that help me win championships, help me be loved and part of a team now.
Oh, damn. That's good. That's good. David, this was fucking great. This was awesome. We had such an awesome time, dude. And we appreciate the support. We appreciate the inspiration. You are someone we look up to in this world. And I'm very grateful that you spent time with us, man. Thank you.
Oh, of course. I'm happy to come back anytime. You didn't offer for me to come back, but I would invite myself.
You have a standing invitation. Hey.